Did you know that the Earth is flat? Wait, what? Why would you say that? There's no curvature, it's not spinning, and space is fake. But it's the 21st century. Are there still people who say that the Earth is flat? Yes, there are. Do they have any evidence? They do. Today, I'll describe that evidence and some of the other ideas of the modern flat Earth movement, and then tell you what the typical mainstream science or glober responses are. Who are these people that actually say the Earth is flat? I'll start by telling you who they aren't. They're not people just pretending to believe or trolling the internet just for fun. They really are sincere when they say that the Earth is not a globe. They're also not part of the Flat Earth Society, which started in 1956 and probably had less than 4,000 members at its peak in the 90s. Instead, this video will be about people in the current Flat Earth community who generally congregate on social media like Discord, Facebook, YouTube, and to a lesser degree maybe Instagram and Twitter. They've also had a couple of conferences. This is a fairly recent movement, with most of them joining the Flat Earth community within the past few years, like 2014 or later. Okay, so what's the evidence for Flat Earth? Here are 3 points commonly cited. 1, no curvature measured, so it's flat. 2, no rotation measured, so it's non-spinning. And 3, the vacuum of space is impossible. Instead, there's a dome that holds in the air pressure. In order to present these arguments as fairly as possible, I'm going to play you some audio clips to let them speak for themselves.
You don't have a measurement of curvature, ever, in history, by anyone. We would need when, where, and how it was done. You don't have detection of any rotation, and space as you think of it cannot exist.
If you have an acumen with these 3 arguments, you can defeat the highest of their spinning ball space monkey priests. You'll reduce them to blubber.
Let's look at each of these 3 arguments in detail. First, the Earth has no curvature.
There is no measurable curvature. It's never been measured or demonstrated anywhere on the Earth.
There's no convexity of the surface. The model that was given to us, it's been shown time and time again not to be accurate. It doesn't line up with reality.
We have dozens and dozens of observations that demonstrate the curvature rate being falsified.
So they say not only has curvature never been measured, but you can see farther than you should be able to if the surface were curved. For example, here's an image they call the Black Swan, which is a still image from a video taken at a height of 1 foot above the ocean surface. Since the horizon is visible behind those oil rigs, the Earth cannot be a sphere with a radius of 3959 miles. Why is it called the Black Swan? It comes from this idea. If someone says all swans are white, you can disprove that by showing just one black swan. Similarly, to disprove the globe model, a single image that contradicts it is enough.
We falsified it with the Black Swan. The horizon's actually 10 times farther than it should be.
Based on the radius, this photograph is physically impossible.
Next is rotation. We know the Earth isn't spinning because we don't feel it rotating, and rotation has never been measured.
I now claim to be able to prove conclusively that we are living on a stationary Earth and enjoying the multitude of benefits of a traveling sun.
We can also use lack of Coriolis effect on airplanes like this.
If the Coriolis effect is true, and we know it is, and if the Earth is rotating, then the Charlotte to Los Angeles flight at an airspeed of 500 miles an hour must be 1.5 hours. Must be. It's not, and never will be. Ergo, the Earth is not spinning. Done. Zero. Nada.
The third argument is that the vacuum of space is impossible. The idea of the atmosphere of Earth being next to the vacuum of space is a violation of the second law of thermodynamics, so space doesn't exist.
Anything from space is a second law of thermodynamics violation. Space is claimed to be a vacuum, and the air we breathe here on Earth would absolutely increase in entropy and fill the available space.
Therefore, there is some kind of dome holding in the air.
So we have gas pressure around us that we breathe. Didn't you know the necessary antecedent for gas pressure is a closed container?
Although if you want to get technical, space is nothing more than a concept, so it can't be real in the sense of physical reality. It's literally an idea of an area, which dimensions, which is how we measure physical matter. So when there's not any matter there, it's just a description known as another concept. So we're going to conceptually describe a concept and then, in clown world of heliocentrism, actually apply physical properties, being bending and warping, to this concept that we describe with other concepts.
There are a lot more than these 3. In fact, one of the early catalysts of this modern movement is Eric Dubé's 200 Proofs video, and later a book. But I'll start with just these 3. First, mainstream science says that curvature can be observed. Although we sometimes can see farther than expected, that's because images can be distorted by the atmosphere depending on the weather conditions, especially right next to the water. This time-lapse shows how much things can change over the course of just a few hours. So it's hard to measure anything useful right near the horizon, especially directly over water. Remember, we're talking about very slight differences here. If light bends over a curve even just 0.01 degrees per mile, a curved surface can look perfectly flat. In the black swan argument, flat earthers are saying that since light doesn't bend enough, it's impossible on a globe, but globers are saying that if light bends even just that 0.01 degrees per mile, that would explain the picture. And anyway, it seems to me that flat earthers would need light to be bending to explain sunsets over the ocean. Andrew Young at San Diego State has a page with more details, and he says if conditions are exactly right, it's possible to see things along a curved surface up to 750 kilometers away. Next, flat earthers say we don't feel rotation, and they are correct. But that's because Earth is rotating so slowly, at a rate of 0.000696 RPM. Yes, that translates to more than 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, but remember, we humans cannot sense speed. We can only feel acceleration and rotation. And the other rotations around the sun and around the galactic core are even less of a factor. Do you think a tiny ant standing on the hour hand of a clock would notice it moving? That hour hand is rotating at twice the rate compared to the daily rotation of the Earth. Finally, what about air pressure? Again, flat earthers are correct about pressure requiring a container, but only on small scales. On large scales, the weight of the air causes atmospheric pressure with no container required. You can verify this by measuring pressure gradients. At sea level, pressure is 101,325 pascals, but if you go up just 8.5 meters, about 3 stories high, it decreases to 101,223 pascals. That's a change in pressure of 102 pascals with no container in between. Well, the same thing happens much higher. At an altitude of 50 kilometers, the pressure is only 100 pascals. Going from there to a hard vacuum is also a change in 100 pascals. So if you don't need a container between 0 and 10 meters, why do you need one between 50 kilometers and higher? It's the same pressure differential. I like to use this analogy. How do you make grapes into grape juice? Well, you have to squeeze them. You put them into a container and squeeze. So you may think that a container is necessary for making grape juice. That's usually true, but there is another way. You could make a big pile of grapes on the ground, and as the pile grows bigger and bigger, eventually it will weigh so much that the grapes on the bottom will be squeezed and you'll get grape juice without using a container. It's somewhat similar with atmosphere. The weight of the air causes higher pressure at the bottom. So, a container is not the necessary antecedent for pressure. Gas does not expand in all directions exactly equally. There's a slight bias in the downward direction due to the weight of the air, and that's enough to create atmospheric pressure without a container. Furthermore, calling atmospheric pressure a violation of the second law of thermodynamics is just a misunderstanding of that law. I want you to notice something about the form of these arguments. You'll see that they generally say something like this: if the Earth really were a globe, this is what should happen, and it doesn't. So most of their evidence is negative evidence. Here are a couple of examples about how water should flow on the globe, or how day and night should work, or how clouds should work in the atmosphere. The scientific response is generally no, that's not what should happen. You're either misunderstanding what we're saying, or you have the science wrong. Another kind of argument is to say something like all oceans are flat, or water always seeks its level. It turns out that both sides agree with those statements, but mean different things by them because they have different definitions of the word flat and the word level.
A sea and an ocean, right? Everywhere you go, we see and observe flat level water. If 70% of the surface of the Earth is flat, it cannot be a ball, right?
Flat earthers mean the surfaces of oceans follow a perfectly straight line. That's just the common sense idea of flat and level. Globers say that the word flat and level technically means something more nuanced, like following gravitationally equipotential lines which curve slightly, so a flat ocean or a level plane actually curves slightly with the shape of the Earth. In other words, when we say flat, we don't mean that it follows a perfectly straight line. We're using a slightly different definition. On small scales, you don't really need to distinguish between the definitions. It only makes a difference when you're talking about large objects, maybe bigger than a couple hundred meters. So when a flat earther says, how can the Earth be a globe if 70% of the Earth is water and water is flat? I would say, I agree, it can't, using your definition of flat being a perfectly straight line. But that's not what we're saying when we say the globe is 70% flat water. We mean flat as in flat means smoothly curving around the globe. Now, you can't prove things with definitions like this one way or the other, but it's helpful to be clear about what definition you're using when you're using words like flat or level. Another word flat earthers sometimes use differently is the word believe. If you ask them, do you believe the earth is flat? Many of them will say, no, I don't believe, I know.
We don't need to believe things. This is not a religion. As soon as you say belief, that is an immediate connotation to religion. There is no belief here. Gravity does not exist. Period.
There's a bigger cult called scientism. They say scientists believe, because you might as well be saying the pastor believes or the Pope believes. And then you must believe, because belief is usually tied to a religion or some kind of cult-like dogmatic thinking.
As if the word believe implies some kind of misplaced faith in something with no evidence. That can happen. However, most philosophers would say that if you know something, you also believe it. To believe something just means that you think it's true, so I find their use of that word just bizarre. Some flat earthers will also define science in such a way to include only experimental science, not observational sciences like astronomy, marine biology, or paleontology.
In the scientific method, your independent variable is the cause, has to be able to manipulate the effect. That's what you observe.
According to this, astronomy isn't even a science because the researcher isn't manipulating an independent variable that causes some effect to happen. I would say if your definition of science doesn't include astronomy, that's more of a problem with your definition, not with astronomy. Another tactic I've seen is an argument from Incredulity. Do you really think X, Y, and Z happen? Well, just because something seems amazing doesn't mean that it's automatically false. Imagine there were radio wave deniers who said something like this. Do you actually think there are invisible radio waves coming from your phone? That your voice can be converted into mathematical constructs of ones and zeros, and that you can carry on a conversation with someone hundreds of miles away? You've never even seen radio waves. You've never measured them. Do you actually believe in them? And my answer would be yes, I do. This feels similar to some arguments used by flat earthers. Things that are hard to understand aren't automatically false. It's okay to believe in some things you can't directly experience yourself, like radio waves, if you have sufficient reason and evidence for believing they exist. What about evidence for the spinning globe theory? Now, this video has mostly taken a look at evidence for flat Earth with some common responses, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail here, but flat earthers generally do have responses for most of these kinds of evidence. Here's a quick sample. Here's a picture from outer space giving evidence for the Earth being a globe. Well, that's CGI. Okay, fine. Here's a picture from 1972 before CGI existed. They faked it some other way. Okay, well here's eyewitness testimony from the Apollo astronauts. Apollo was a Greek god. Those astronauts are lying. See, they look kind of tired and don't look nearly as happy as I think they should be. I don't know how you could tell. Also, here are some parents that don't look sufficiently sad about what happened. Stop, we're not going there. GPS works in the middle of the ocean. No, it doesn't. Yes, it really does. Well, even if it does, the signal comes from balloons or ocean buoys or cell towers. Gravity naturally forms things into spheres. If the Earth were flat, gravity would draw everything toward the center. Gravity is fake. Then why do things fall? Density and buoyancy. A 24-hour sun is visible in December in Antarctica, which doesn't seem to fit your model. We don't have a model. Okay, but what about the 24-hour sun? That's a lie, it doesn't happen. But here are some videos showing it. Those are faked, or maybe run in reverse. What about the constant angular size of the sun during the sunset? If the sun were moving away from us over a flat plane, shouldn't it get smaller? It does get smaller. Here, look at this video. No, that's just glare. You need to use a solar filter. I've never seen it getting smaller when setting. Well, if it doesn't get smaller, that's because the atmosphere is too dry or too wet, or because of atmospheric lensing that keeps it the same size. And anyway, stop looking up at the sky.
So quit asking us how the sky works. When the floor is flat, you can test it.
And on it goes. I find each of these responses insufficient. Therefore, I say it's most rational to believe that the Earth is indeed rotating and that it's roughly spherical in shape. Finally, I'll leave you with this quote speculating about the motivation of those of us who oppose flat Earth beliefs.
You know what fascinates me is this whole community of people who are fighting against the flat earth. They get a validation from being around other people that think the same way that they do. I think somehow internally, like, they really have a lot of doubt, but they fight that doubt by surrounding themselves with people that think the same way that they do.
No comment. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.